A Roman legion disappears without a trace in Britain. Decades later, halfway across the world, Chinese historians record a strange group of foreign soldiers, disciplined, organized, and fighting in tight formations no one in Asia had ever seen before. For centuries, people have quietly wondered, could it have been the same men? That's the enduring mystery of the Ninth Roman Legion, Legio Non Hispana, an elite unit that served Rome for over a century before vanishing from history without explanation. The Ninth had been through it all. They fought under Julius Caesar in Gaul, helped crush revolts in Hispania, and earned their reputation the hard way on muddy battlefields and in burning frontier towns. By the early 2nd century CE, they were stationed in northern Britain, posted at Eboracum, modern-day York, where they were tasked with securing the empire's edge. And then, sometime after the year 120, their name disappears. No record of reassignment, no account of defeat, no tribute, no monument, not even a dishonorable mention. One of Rome's most experienced legions simply fades out of the empire's meticulous military records. The most accepted theory is also the most unsettling, that the Ninth marched north to face the hostile tribes of what is now Scotland and were completely destroyed so thoroughly that Rome chose to bury the event. It wouldn't have been the first time an imperial embarrassment was quietly erased. But there's a problem. No battlefield has ever been found. No skeletons, no shattered armor, no scattered weapons. Just an eerie silence. And that silence opens the door to something even stranger. Thousands of miles away in China's Gansu province, the village of Liqian claims unusual roots. For generations, locals there have passed down stories of foreign ancestors, men who came from the West, who fought in square formations, and who looked different from the native Han. Some villagers have lighter hair, deep-set eyes, and even European facial features. Then there's the Chinese historical record. In 36 BCE, the Han army fought a mysterious group of warriors who used a fish-scale formation, a term scholars have suggested might describe the Roman testudo, that famous shield wall used by legions to protect themselves from all sides. Could Roman soldiers possibly? The survivors of the Ninth have been captured, sold, and slowly pushed eastward by war trade and chance. Could they have ended up in Central Asia or even China long after disappearing from Roman records? It sounds like historical fiction. And yet, the idea refuses to die. Modern researchers have tested the genetics of Liqian's residents and found traces of Western ancestry, though nothing conclusive. There are no Roman coins or Latin inscriptions in the region, no ancient sandals tucked beneath the soil. But the story persists, floating somewhere between archaeology and folklore. Of course, not everyone buys it. Many historians argue the timeline doesn't quite line up. The battle mentioned in Chinese records happened nearly a century before the Ninth disappeared. And even if some Romans had made it east, why hasn't more evidence turned up? Other explanations exist. Some suggest the Ninth was simply renamed or quietly absorbed into another legion. Roman bureaucracy was vast, and sometimes paper trails faded with time. But that still doesn't explain why there are no later references, no tombstones, no service records, no reassigned officers appearing elsewhere in the empire. Still others think the legion deserted entirely. perhaps stranded in hostile territory. Cut off from supply lines, they abandoned the Eagle Standard and vanished into the hills, living out their days as mercenaries or farmers among the very people they once came to conquer. And then there are the theories you don't mention in academic journals. That the ninth didn't just vanish, they were taken. Lost to time, to space, to fate. The kind of mystery that doesn't want to be solved. Whatever the truth, the disappearance of the ninth leaves behind more than an empty entry in Roman records. It leaves a silence deep enough to echo. 5,000 trained soldiers didn't just fall off the map. They marched into history and never came out the other side. 9 Soviet hikers set out for the mountains. Only fragments of their story ever came back. Days later, their tent was found ripped open from the inside. Bodies scattered in the snow. Some nearly naked in sub-zero temperatures. Others with crushed bones, missing tongues, and no signs of struggle. And just like that, the Dyatlov Pass incident became one of the most chilling mysteries of the 20th century. It was February 1959, and the group experienced students from the Ural Polytechnic Institute had set out on a winter expedition through the northern Ural Mountains. Their leader was Igor Dyatlov, a skilled hiker with a talent for logistics and a reputation for caution. The group's goal to reach Mount Otorten, a route that would earn them a Grade 3 hiking certification, the highest possible in the Soviet system. They never made it. When they failed to return, search teams were dispatched. What they found shocked everyone. The hiker's tent had been cut open from the inside, as if they had tried to escape something in a panic. Their belongings, boots, coats, food, even their journals were left behind. Footprints in the snow showed people walking barefoot or in socks fleeing into the wilderness. 2 bodies were found near a forest, stripped to their underwear, curled near the remains of a small fire. 3 more were discovered between the tent and the woods, as if trying to crawl back. The last 4 weren't found for months. When they were, it only got stranger. 1 had a crushed skull. 2 had fractured ribs so severe they resembled injuries from a car crash, but without any external wounds. 1 woman was missing her tongue and her eyes. All of them died from a mix of hypothermia and trauma. The Soviet investigation ended with a phrase that has haunted the case ever since: a compelling natural force. That was it. No avalanche, no animals, no attackers. Just a force. One compelling enough to make 9 people run into a freezing forest in the middle of the night, half-dressed, and die separately in terror. Many believe an avalanche must have triggered the panic. A sudden shift in snowpack could have caused the group to believe the slope above them was about to collapse. In that moment, slicing open the tent and fleeing would have seemed rational. But the tent was still upright. The terrain didn't show typical avalanche debris. And even if it had, how do you explain the crushed ribs, the missing tongue? Other theories involve katabatic winds, rare but deadly gusts that can descend a slope like an invisible hammer. These winds can reach hurricane speeds, disorienting and freezing people in minutes. Some believe such winds could have spooked the hikers, but it still doesn't quite explain the internal injuries or why they didn't return to the tent. Then things get unusual. Some locals reported seeing strange orange lights in the sky on the night the hikers died. UFO enthusiasts point to these sightings combined with the group's inexplicable behavior as signs of something unearthly. It didn't help that some of the hikers' clothing contained traces of radiation, enough to raise eyebrows, though not necessarily enough to glow in the dark. Others claim the Soviet military was testing secret weapons in the area. Some suspect the hikers stumbled into something they weren't supposed to see, like parachute mines, chemical agents, or high-frequency sound experiments. But there are no confirmed military records of such tests. And even if there were, we wouldn't expect the government to hand them over. Still, the infrasound theory has gained traction. It suggests that low-frequency vibrations produced by wind passing over the mountain could trigger a kind of irrational panic in humans, enough to cause disorientation, dread, and flight. It's plausible and doesn't require aliens or cover-ups. But again, it leaves gaps. One theory ventures into cryptozoology, a yeti, a giant humanoid creature that attacked the campers in their sleep. This idea emerged from a torn journal page and a scribbled note. From now on, we know that snowmen exist. The phrase was likely a joke, the theory less so. What's most chilling is how close they were to surviving. They had dry clothes, food, and gear. If they had just stayed in the tent, they would have been fine. But something drove them out, something strong enough to override training logic and self-preservation. Today, a stone monument stands at the Dyatlov Pass, named in honor of the group's leader. The forest has grown back. The snow still falls quietly. But the questions never stopped. Why did they flee barefoot into the night? Why were their injuries so extreme? And what exactly was that compelling force? Some believe the truth is already buried somewhere in a Soviet archive or in the frozen earth itself. Others believe we'll never know, that the Urals took something from those 9 hikers and gave nothing back. And when the wind rises on that lonely pass, some say it still whispers their names. A man arrives at Tokyo Airport in 1954 with a passport from a country that doesn't exist. He speaks several languages, carries legitimate-looking documents, and grows increasingly confused when officials question him. The country he claims to be from Torrid has never appeared on any map. Within hours, the man disappears from a guarded hotel room without a trace. And just like that, one of the strangest modern travel mysteries is born. It begins, as these things often do, with a routine customs check. A businessman steps off a flight at Haneda Airport in Tokyo. He looks ordinary enough, well-dressed, middle-aged, calm. He presents his passport for inspection, and that's where things start to go sideways. The document looks real. The stamps check out. The passport's design resembles those used by various European countries. But the country of issue Torrid doesn't exist. Not now, not ever. Japanese officials, thinking it must be a typo, ask where Torrid is. The man points to a spot on the map somewhere near the borders of France, Andorra, and Spain. Only, there's nothing there. Just mountains. No Torrid. The man grows frustrated. He insists his country has existed for hundreds of years. He's been to Japan multiple times before he says, and pulls out past travel visas to prove it. Even stranger, the companies listed on his business documents exist, but none of them recognize his name. His checkbook contains the name of a bank that no one has heard of. His driver's license is from Torrid. His native tongue seems to be French, but he also speaks fluent Japanese and several other European languages. By now, the officials are more than confused, they're uneasy. Suspecting a criminal, a spy, or a very elaborate prankster, they place the man in a guarded hotel room while they investigate. And this is where the story fully enters legend. The next morning, the man is gone, vanished. No sign of escape, no broken windows, no tampered locks. He wasn't just missing from the room, he was missing from reality. His belongings, documents, and passport disappeared with him. The room was on an upper floor with no balcony and a locked hallway. He'd been under watch all night, and yet, nothing. Of course, skeptics have tried to explain the tale away. They say it's urban legend, perhaps a fabrication that grew over time. The earliest accounts of the man from Torred didn't appear until the 1960s, and they tend to repeat each other, often without hard sources. Some suggest it may be a distorted retelling of a real incident twisted by time and retellings into something much stranger. But if it is a fable, it's an unusually detailed one. The documents, the reactions, the geography, there's enough specificity to make people uneasy. Not because it's provable, but because it feels like something that shouldn't be possible. And yet, somehow is. That's where the alternate dimension theory comes in. Some believe the man slipped into our world from a parallel timeline where Torred was real. A tiny European nation that split from Andorra or France generations ago, unnoticed by our history, but very real in his. According to this idea, the man accidentally crossed over into our version of reality. Maybe due to a tear in space-time. Maybe due to some unknowable cosmic mistake, and found himself surrounded by people who had never heard of his country. If that's true, then his disappearance was just a return trip. He blinked back into his own version of Earth, confused and irritated, with no idea that he'd briefly become a legend somewhere else. Then again, maybe he was a con artist who got ahead of himself, or a man suffering from a dissociative episode, convinced of a fictional past. Maybe the entire story was invented, an early form of creepypasta, passed through news clippings and radio programs to become something mythic. But if that's the case, why has no one ever tracked down the original incident report? Why do versions of the story continue to surface in multiple languages, often citing similar details? And why does it still give people chills? Perhaps it's the fear of dislocation. The idea that you could step off a plane, show your ID, and suddenly be told that your country doesn't exist, that your home is gone, that no one remembers what you remember, and that the more you insist, the stranger you sound. For some, the man from Torred is just a curious riddle. For others, it's proof, quiet, shadowy proof, that our world isn't as solid as we think. And if it happened once, who's to say it hasn't happened again? An entire colony of English settlers disappears without a sound. Over 100 men, women, and children simply vanish from the shores of the New World, leaving behind no graves, no bodies, and only a single cryptic word carved into a tree, Croatoan. That's all that remains of the lost colony of Roanoke, one of the oldest and most unsettling mysteries in American history. It began in 1587 when a group of 115 English colonists, led by John White, landed on Roanoke Island, off the coast of what is now North Carolina. This was England's second attempt to establish a foothold in the New World, and this time the settlers had brought families. They weren't just there to explore or trade, they came to build homes and stay. But Roanoke wasn't an easy place to survive. Harsh weather, limited supplies, and tense relations with local tribes made things difficult almost immediately. Within weeks, the colony was struggling. White, the governor, decided to sail back to England to gather more provisions and support. He left behind his daughter, his infant granddaughter, Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the Americas, and every colonist who had trusted him to return. He didn't come back for 3 years. It wasn't entirely his fault. England was at war with Spain, and every available ship was commandeered for defense. White waited, and finally returned to Roanoke in 1590. But when he arrived, the colony was gone, completely gone. The houses had been dismantled, not destroyed, but taken apart methodically, as if the colonists had left in an orderly fashion. There were no signs of a fight, no blood, no hurried escape. The only clue, the word Croatoan, carved into the trunk of a tree, and the letters Crow etched into another nearby. White had instructed the colonists to carve a cross if they were forced to flee by violence. No cross was found, which suggested that whatever happened, it wasn't sudden, or at least not hostile. But that didn't explain where they went. The word Croatoan referred to a nearby island, now Hatteras Island, home to a Native American tribe friendly to the English. White tried to sail there, believing the colonists had moved but bad weather, and a damaged ship forced him to turn back. He never made it to Croatoan. He never saw his family again, and no one ever found the colonists. What followed were centuries of speculation. One theory holds that the settlers assimilated with local tribes, intermarrying, adopting their ways, and disappearing into native communities. Some later English explorers reported seeing Native Americans with gray eyes and fair hair. Others claimed to find European-style homes deep in tribal territory, but nothing definitive ever surfaced. Another theory suggests they tried to sail back to England on their own and were lost at sea. That seems unlikely. None of them were skilled enough for an Atlantic crossing, and there's no record of a boat large enough being constructed. Some believe they were massacred, perhaps by hostile tribes or Spanish soldiers moving north from Florida. But again, no evidence, no remains, no weapons, just silence. The strangest theories veer into the supernatural, that the colonists fell victim to a curse, or that they were swept away by some ancient force tied to the land. That Croatoan wasn't a destination, but a warning. That word, by the way, keeps showing up. When Edgar Allan Poe was found delirious on the streets of Baltimore shortly before his death, his final word was reportedly Croatoan. When the stagecoach robber, Black Bart, disappeared from prison without a trace, the word was carved into the wall of his cell. It was even allegedly found scribbled in the journal of Amelia Earhart after her disappearance. Coincidence? Probably, but eerie nonetheless. In 2020, archaeologists found fragments of pottery and European artifacts on Hatteras Island, leading some to believe that at least part of the Roanoke colony did relocate there. But without clear documentation or remains, the mystery lingers. What happened to those men, women, and children? Did they survive, adapt, and choose to vanish into a new world? Or did something darker consume them? We may never know. The forest has reclaimed the land where the colony once stood. The waves have shifted the coastline, and the word on the tree is long gone, carried off by time and rot. But if you stand quietly at the edge of Roanoke Island, the wind through the trees sometimes sounds like a whisper, a name, a warning, a place never reached. Croatoan. In 1997, an underwater microphone in the South Pacific picked up a sound. Not just any sound, it was louder than a blue whale, the largest animal on Earth. It echoed across nearly 5,000 kilometers of ocean. And yet no one, not the Navy, not oceanographers, not marine biologists, could say what caused it. The sound was named the Bloop. And to this day, its origin remains one of the ocean's most unsettling riddles. Let's set the scene. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, had been using a network of underwater microphones called hydrophones to monitor volcanic activity and military movement under the ocean. But in the summer of '97, something entirely unexpected registered on the equipment. It was a deep gurgling sound, rising rapidly in pitch, like something enormous exhaling underwater. The kind of noise that feels like it should belong to a creature. A very, very big creature. What made the bloop so strange wasn't just its volume. It was that the sound's acoustic signature resembled a living animal. Not geological rumbling, not man-made interference. It sounded alive, and yet, no known marine animal is capable of producing that kind of volume. Not even close. Blue whales, the loudest animals ever recorded, didn't come near it. Whatever made the bloop would have had to be larger than any sea creature we've ever documented. Naturally, theories began to swirl. The internet, being the internet, quickly jumped to the most Lovecraftian conclusion available. A deep-sea leviathan, some kraken-like beast lurking in the darkness thousands of meters below. Some even pointed to H.P. Lovecraft's fictional creature, Cthulhu, which was said to slumber in the very part of the ocean where the bloop was recorded off the coast of South America, near a place Lovecraft called Aurelia. Coincidence probably, but a delicious one. More grounded scientists proposed other ideas. The leading explanation is that the bloop was caused by ice quakes, massive icebergs cracking and fracturing in Antarctica. Ice can make surprisingly organic-sounding noises, especially when under stress. The bloop may have simply been a huge slab of ice, breaking apart and sinking. But even NOAA's own reports initially leaned toward a biological origin. Their engineers and researchers weren't ready to chalk it up to ice right away. It took years of speculation and analysis before the icequake label stuck, and even then, it didn't fully satisfy everyone. The problem is the scale. Icequakes can be loud, yes, but this loud. Across multiple hydrophones spaced thousands of kilometers apart, and sounding almost deliberate in its pitch shift. The bloop wasn't the only sound of its kind either. Other mysterious ocean noises have been catalogued like the Julia upsweep and train, each with distinct audio signatures and no confirmed source. All recorded in the deep Pacific, all unexplained. We know less about our oceans than we do about the surface of Mars. The Mariana Trench alone is over 7 miles deep, with crushing pressures, total darkness, and temperatures just above freezing. It's the perfect hiding place for anything that doesn't want to be found. So maybe the bloop was just a piece of ice cracking and tumbling. Or maybe it was something else entirely. Something that surfaced just long enough to groan into the dark before slipping away. Today you can listen to the bloop yourself. It's available online. Just a short clip. Muffled low, a rising warble that shouldn't be terrifying. And yet, somehow is. Because deep down, we don't really believe the ocean is empty. It's too quiet, too vast. And every now and then, it makes a sound like it's breathing. A killer taunts the police with letters, ciphers, and riddles. He names himself in one of them, I am the Zodiac. His crimes are brutal. His messages are mocking. And one of his encrypted letters, decades later, still hasn't been cracked. No one knows who he was. No one ever caught him. And somewhere out there, he may have lived the rest of his life quietly, while the rest of the world tried to decode a nightmare. The Zodiac Killer haunted Northern California in the late 1960s and early 1970s. His crimes weren't just horrifying, they were theatrical. He murdered at least 5 people, possibly more, and targeted young couples in parked cars or isolated areas. His weapons varied, so did his methods. But his hunger for attention stayed consistent. After his first confirmed murders in 1968 and 1969, he began sending letters to local newspapers. Inside were confessions, threats, and handwritten ciphers, complex blocks of symbols he claimed would reveal his identity if solved. The first cipher, known as the Z48, was cracked by a schoolteacher and his wife. It contained a chilling message, a rant about collecting slaves for the afterlife, and a love of killing. But it did not reveal his name. 3 more ciphers followed. One of them, the Z340, went unsolved for 51 years, until a group of amateur codebreakers finally cracked it in 2020. But again, no name. The Zodiac simply rambled about, enjoying life, taunting the authorities, and denying he would ever be caught. And then there's the 4th cipher, the Z13, which remains a mystery to this day. Just 13 symbols. Short, strange, possibly meaningless, or possibly a signature hidden in plain sight. The Zodiac didn't just want to kill. He wanted an audience. He gave himself a logo, a crosshair inside a circle, and included it in every letter, as if branding his own personal horror series. He once threatened to shoot out the tires of a school bus and pick off the kiddies as they come bouncing out. He described his victims in detail. Sometimes he even got the details wrong, but that didn't seem to matter. His grip on the public imagination had already formed. Despite dozens of suspects and hundreds of tips, the Zodiac was never identified. The case grew cold, and over time, the confirmed crimes slowed and then stopped. But the letters, some genuine, others possibly forged, kept arriving for years. And the mystery deepened. Was he a loner? A genius? A man hiding in plain sight, working a day job, while the rest of the city read about his latest letter over morning coffee? Some suspects rose to prominence. One of the most famous was Arthur Lee Allen, a convicted child molester who owned a Zodiac brand wristwatch and matched parts of the killer's psychological profile. But no conclusive evidence ever linked him to the crimes. He died in 1992. In 2021, a group of independent investigators, calling themselves the Casebreakers, claimed they had identified the Zodiac as Gary Francis Post, a man who died in 2018. They cited photographs, scar patterns, and cryptic letters. But the FBI didn't confirm it, and many experts remain skeptical. And then there are the code breakers, still hard at work. The Z13 cipher is a constant itch in the minds of amateur cryptanalysts. It's just long enough to contain a name, if the symbols are authentic. But what if it's a joke, a decoy, a red herring planted by a man who understood how obsession works? One of the Zodiac's favorite themes was control, not just over his victims, but over the public, over fear, over curiosity. He once ended a letter with the words, "I am waiting for a good movie about me." He got it multiple times. The Zodiac has inspired countless books, films, and theories. His symbol still shows up on t-shirts and conspiracy forums. The killer, whoever he was, has become a cultural shadow, just visible in the corner of our collective eye. And through it all, that one cipher remains. 13 characters, 13 chances to whisper a name through time. But the symbols stay silent. And maybe that's exactly what he wanted. A man checks into a hotel under a fake name. He brings no luggage, keeps the lights off, and spends most of his time in silence. Within 48 hours, he's found beaten to death in his room, a room that was locked from the inside. No one sees an attacker. No one hears a struggle. And to this day, no one knows who he was who killed him or why. This is the case of room 1046 at the Hotel President in Kansas City. It's real, it's terrifying, and it reads like the start of a film noir that never gets to the credits. It began on January the 2nd, 1935. A tall, thin man checked into the hotel using the name Roland T. Owen. He requested an interior room, no windows, and paid in cash. He had no bags except for a comb and a toothbrush. The staff later recalled that he kept the blinds drawn and the lights dimmed even during the day. Right from the start, things felt off. The maid reported that during cleaning, Owen would often sit in total darkness. She also overheard strange conversations. Once while she was cleaning, he warned her not to lock the door because a friend was coming. Another time, she heard him say to someone on the phone, "No, Don, I don't want to eat. I'm not hungry." The name Don would come up again ominously, but never with a face. On the night of January 3rd, the hotel operator noticed that the phone in room 1046 had been left off the hook. A bellboy was sent up to check. He knocked, and a weak voice inside told him to come in. But the door was locked. After more knocking, the voice said, "Turn on the lights." The bellboy gave up and left. Hours later, the phone was still off the hook. Another staff member went up. This time, he used a master key. What he saw was horrifying. Owen was lying on the bed, naked, covered in blood. He'd been tied up, beaten, and stabbed multiple times. Strangely, he was still alive. When asked who did this to him, he simply replied, "Nobody." He claimed he'd fallen and hit his head. Minutes later, he lost consciousness. He died at the hospital shortly after. The room itself was a puzzle. No signs of forced entry. No weapons. The only items in the room were an unlit cigarette, a hairpin, and a bottle of diluted sulfuric acid. The towels were missing. The phone had been deliberately taken off the hook. There were blood smears on the walls and ceiling, and the door was locked from the inside. Whoever attacked Owen had either escaped impossibly or had never been there at all. The police quickly discovered that Roland D. Owen was a false name. There was no record of anyone by that name. Newspapers ran sketches of the man's face. A few people claimed to recognize him, but nothing stuck. He had no family come forward, no employer, no bank records, no history. Then a break or something like it. An anonymous caller contacted a local funeral home and offered to pay for Owen's burial. The man refused to give his name, but said Owen had been involved in an affair gone wrong and that he deserved what he got. A cash-stuffed envelope later arrived at the funeral home with enough money to cover the costs. The body was buried under the name Roland T. Owen because no one knew what else to call him. And just when the trail had gone cold, something even stranger happened. A woman in Los Angeles recognized the photo in the newspaper and said it was her son. But when investigators looked into it, they couldn't confirm anything. Names didn't match. Timelines were blurry. The case once again evaporated. To this day, no one knows who Don was. No one knows what the motive could have been. There was no theft, no apparent jealousy, no business dispute. The police eventually suspected that Owen had been involved in some sort of criminal network, possibly a gangster or a victim of blackmail. But there's no proof. It's the kind of case that invites theories. Some say it was a mob hit. Others think it was a twisted love triangle. Some even float the idea that Owen wasn't the victim, but a decoy for someone else whose enemies had found him first. Whatever the truth, Room 1046 has never given up its secrets. The room still exists. The hotel is still there. And every so often, someone reopens the case, hoping that modern forensics or a lucky break might solve it at last. But most nights, the story just stays there, quiet, unsolved, and locked from the inside. In the 1930s, a Hungarian pianist composed a haunting melody, so mournful, so saturated with sorrow, that it was soon blamed for a string of suicides across Europe. Radio stations banned it. Record labels stopped pressing it. The song came to be known not just by its title, but by its growing reputation as the Hungarian suicide song. Its real name, Gloomy Sunday. It was written in 1933 by Rezo Seres, a struggling songwriter in Budapest during one of the darkest periods of his life. Originally intended as a plea for peace, the lyrics were eventually rewritten by poet Laszlo Javor into a love song about death and despair. The final version tells the story of a man so devastated by the loss of his lover that he decides to end his life on a Sunday. The melody is slow minor key and almost eerily hypnotic. Think of a lullaby turned inside out, where every note seems to fall like a tear. It's the kind of song that doesn't just sound sad, it feels infected with sadness. At first, it seemed like just another melancholy tune. But then, the stories began. A shopkeeper in Berlin was found dead in his apartment, the sheet music to Gloomy Sunday lying beside him. In Budapest, a young woman overdosed on pills while clutching a record of the song. In Vienna, a man shot himself after requesting the song to be played at a cafe. In London, a teenage girl drowned herself with the record still spinning nearby. The song was blamed over and over again. Some newspapers claimed the song had been linked to over 19 suicides in Hungary alone. Police started referring to it in reports. The Hungarian government allegedly considered banning it outright. Radio stations across Europe and later in the United States pulled it from their playlists. The BBC famously allowed only instrumental versions to be played, no vocals permitted. Was it all media hysteria? A string of tragic coincidences amplified by rumor? Probably, but the association stuck. Rezo Ceres. The composer found sudden fame and grew increasingly uneasy about it. He was reportedly devastated that a piece of music he'd written during a dark moment had taken on such a sinister life of its own. And then, in a cruel twist of fate, he committed suicide himself. 1968, decades after the song's release, Gloomy Sunday seemed to trail despair like smoke. In the US, the song gained new attention when Billie Holiday recorded it in 1941. Her version, slow, lush, and unmistakably sad, cemented the song's eerie reputation. Some radio stations refused to play it even then, believing it might trigger depression or worse in listeners already struggling. Psychologists later debated the effect. Could a song really cause someone to end their life? Or was Gloomy Sunday simply present in moments of despair? A tragic coincidence mistaken for a catalyst. There's no evidence the song contained subliminal messages or hidden tones or mind-altering frequencies. Just notes and words arranged in a particularly sorrowful way. And yet, when you hear it, there's something there. It lingers. It has the weight of something older than music, like grief made audible. Today, Gloomy Sunday is remembered as a curiosity, an urban legend wrapped in a real melody. The kind of thing you might play late at night, half to hear the beauty, half to feel the chill. The full lyrics are widely available. The song is easy to find, but most people don't play it twice. It's just a tune after all. Just a song written by a lonely man during a cold winter in 1933. But every now and then, someone listens to it and feels something strange, as if the notes aren't just expressing sadness, but infecting it. A 3-minute melody that somehow feels like the sound of giving up. When archaeologists opened a sealed tomb in Egypt's Deir el-Bahari complex, they expected to find the usual linens, amulets, careful wrappings, perhaps a name inscribed on the shroud. Instead, they found a twisted, contorted figure, with his mouth wide open in what looked like an eternal scream. Arms and legs bound, head thrown back, lips parted in agony. He became known as the Screaming Mummy, and no one could quite explain what happened to him. At first glance, it seemed like something had gone horribly wrong with the embalming process. Most Egyptian mummies are serene posed, wrapped with meticulous care, and given the dignity of stillness. But not this one. His body looked tortured. His jaw hung open in what some called a silent howl. The muscles and joints were twisted unnaturally. The usual signs of preparation were missing. Even stranger, he had been buried without ceremony. No inscriptions, no tomb paintings, no identifying markers. He was placed in a crude coffin and left among other royal mummies, almost like an afterthought, like someone had tried to forget him, even in death. The body was first discovered in 1881, but it wasn't until the 20th century that scholars started to piece together a possible story. One theory suggested he had been poisoned, his body showing signs of rapid decomposition, as if he died in distress and had not been properly embalmed. Another theory pointed to the bindings on his hands and feet. Was he buried alive? Had he suffocated while still conscious, entombed as punishment? Then came the most chilling possibility of all: he was royalty. Studies of the skeleton and burial location suggest this may have been Pentuer, a prince involved in the so-called harem conspiracy to assassinate his father, Pharaoh Rameses III. According to ancient papyri, Pentuer was caught, tried, and sentenced to death, possibly by forced suicide. That would explain the lack of ritual burial. A prince denied the comforts of the afterlife because of treason. But even that doesn't explain his expression. Was the scream real? Could rigor mortis have locked his mouth open after death? Some experts say yes, that without proper embalming, the jaw might fall open naturally. Others aren't so sure. They argue that even in sudden or violent deaths, this particular position, arms twisted, mouth gaping, is rare, unnatural, almost theatrical. And then there's the broader question: why keep him near the other royals at all? If he was disgraced, why not destroy the body entirely or bury it in obscurity? Why wrap him up, hide him among the honored dead, but leave him nameless, faceless, and posed in agony? Some think the answer lies in ancient Egyptian beliefs. To be denied a name was a kind of second death removal, from memory, from history, from the afterlife. But to destroy the body entirely was dangerous. If he was royal by blood, then even traitorous, he may have retained just enough status to be preserved, though dishonored. Others believe he was cursed, the victim of a ritual punishment meant not only to kill, but to trap the soul. In Egyptian religion, the preservation of the body was essential to resurrection in the afterlife. But an improperly buried body, that was a soul stranded forever. Still others think his fate was political. Perhaps his burial was a compromise, his family burying him in secret, unable to honor him publicly, but unwilling to leave him behind entirely. His scream, then, is not the result of pain, but of defiance, a final protest frozen in linen and dust. Today, the screaming mummy lies in the Cairo Museum, surrounded by plaques and soft lighting. But nothing quite prepares visitors for the shock of his face. Among so many composed expressions of death, his seems to be caught in mid-horror, like something interrupted him on the way out of this life. And perhaps that's what unsettles us the most. The idea that someone could die without peace. That a body could carry its story so visibly, its pain, its fear, its unfinished ending. Whether he was Pentuer, a poisoned courtier, or someone else entirely, the screaming mummy endures as one of ancient Egypt's most haunting artifacts. Mouth open, eyes closed, and the question still hanging in the air: what did he see at the end? A man is found dead on an Australian beach in 1948. He has no identification, no wallet, and no tags in his clothing. In fact, all the labels have been carefully cut out. His body bears no signs of violence. He is well-dressed, clean-shaven, and lying as if he simply went to sleep in the sand. But tucked inside a tiny hidden pocket in his trousers is a scrap of paper with 2 words typed on it: Tamam Shud. And so begins one of the most confounding unsolved cases of the 20th century, the mystery of the Somerton Man. The body was discovered on Somerton Beach near Adelaide in the early hours of December 1st, 1948. Witnesses recalled seeing the man lying there the night before, propped against a seawall, legs crossed, immobile. At the time, they assumed he was asleep or drunk. But by morning, it was clear he was dead. Investigators were immediately puzzled. There was no sign of struggle injury or foul play. The autopsy revealed a congested brain, enlarged spleen, and signs of internal bleeding, suggestive of poison. but no traces of any known toxin were found. In short, he died mysteriously. Even stranger were his belongings. He wore a neatly pressed suit with no tags. His shoes were polished to a military shine. He carried no wallet, no ID. Nothing in his pockets revealed who he was, except for a tiny secret pocket sewn into the waistband of his pants, which contained a tightly rolled scrap of paper with the words Tamam Shud. The phrase is Persian. It means ended or finished, and it comes from a 12th century book of poetry called the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. A strange thing to carry in your trousers on your last day alive. The police went public with the detail, and a local man came forward. Weeks earlier, he had found a rare edition of the Rubaiyat tossed into the back seat of his unlocked car near the beach. When police examined the book, they found that the final page, the one that read Tamam Shud, was missing. It was a match. Inside the book's back cover was a set of strange penciled symbols, an apparent code. Letters arranged in broken lines, some repeated, some struck through. Next to that, a phone number. When police dialed it, it led to a woman named Jo Thompson, who lived nearby. Thompson claimed not to know the man, but when shown the plaster death mask taken from the body, her reaction was intense. She nearly fainted. Yet she denied recognizing him. She later said she once owned a copy of the Rubaiyat and had given it to a man named Alfred Boxall, whom investigators briefly thought might be the deceased. But then Boxall turned up alive, with his copy of the book intact. The dead man remained unidentified. His fingerprints matched no known person. His dental records revealed nothing. Even years later, after international efforts and Interpol involvement, no one ever came forward to claim him. So the theories multiplied. Some believe he was a spy, possibly Soviet or British, operating during a period of intense Cold War tension. Adelaide at the time was home to a secretive military research facility. The code, the hidden message, the careful removal of clothing tags, it all pointed to espionage. But there was no hard evidence. Others suggest he may have been involved in a romantic entanglement gone wrong, that Jo Thompson knew more than she let on. And perhaps he had come to see her, only to be turned away. Her reaction to his death mask remains one of the most unsettling moments in the case. And then there's the book itself. The Rubaiyat is no ordinary volume. It's a poetic reflection on fate, death, and the fleeting nature of life. Not the kind of thing one expects to find in the waistband of a corpse on a beach. More recently, in 2022, researchers using modern DNA analysis believed they finally identified the Somerton man as Carl Charles Webb, an electrical engineer and instrument maker from Melbourne. But even with the name, the circumstances of his death remain cloudy. Why was he in Adelaide? Why the secret pocket? Why the book, the code, the mystery? Because even if we now know who he was, we still have no idea what happened to him. The grave of the Somerton man bears a simple inscription. Here lies the unknown man who was found at Somerton Beach. But for decades, he wasn't just unknown, he was unknowable. A man whose final message was a single phrase tucked into a hidden seam, Tamam Shud. Off the coast of Japan, beneath the rolling waves near the island of Yonaguni, lies something strange. Massive stone terraces, perfect right angles, steps, platforms, and what looks like a road, all submerged beneath 25 meters of water. Some call it the Yonaguni Monument. Others call it Atlantis of the East. And the debate over what it really is, natural formation or sunken civilization, has remained unresolved for nearly 40 years. The site was discovered by accident in 1986 when a diver named Kihachiro Aratake was scouting the area for new underwater attractions. Instead of coral reefs or interesting sea life, he found what looked like a massive man-made structure stretching over 150 meters long and nearly 30 meters wide. Giant stone blocks arranged in rows, broad flat surfaces, stairs that seemed too precise to be natural. At first glance, it looked like the ruins of an ancient city, something that had been swallowed by the ocean long ago. As word spread, divers and researchers began flocking to Yonaguni. Among the most vocal was Professor Masaki Kimura, a marine geologist from the University of the Ryukyus. He argued that the site was the remnant of a prehistoric civilization, perhaps dating back over 10,000 years, far older than any known structure in Japan or anywhere in Asia. Kimura pointed to what he believed were carving symbols etched into the stone, even what appeared to be faces or statues. He mapped out what he called streets plazas, and even a pyramid-like structure. In his view, this was no natural fluke. It was a lost city. If true, that would rewrite history. Mainstream archaeology generally holds that complex architecture didn't appear until around 3000 BC, long after the last ice age. But the Yonaguni monument, if artificial, would be twice as old, predating even the pyramids of Egypt. However, not everyone is convinced. Many geologists believe the Yonaguni Formation is a result of natural tectonic activity. Sandstone in the region fractures along horizontal and vertical lines, they say, and ocean erosion over thousands of years can produce flat surfaces, straight edges, and even steps. Some suggest the entire structure could be an elaborate case of pareidolia, our brain's tendency to find patterns, faces, and structures where none exist. In other words, it's a coincidence. A beautiful one, but a coincidence. And yet, when you look at it, it's hard not to wonder. The angles are so sharp, the lines so regular. The staircases have treads of uniform size. There's a trench that resembles a long corridor with 90-degree corners. There's even a tall formation that looks uncannily like an altar or ceremonial platform. Kimura insists he's found evidence of tool marks, ancient post holes, and what may have been walls. He believes the structure was once above sea level, possibly on a coastal plain, before being submerged by melting ice caps at the end of the last ice age. The timing would match with myths and flood legends found across many cultures, including Japan's own tales of submerged kingdoms and sunken temples. Similar to Atlantis, but rooted in local lore. But still, no artifacts have ever been recovered. No pottery, no bones, no tools. Just rock. And rock, as the skeptics point out, can be tricky. Some think it may have been a natural formation that was later modified by early humans. Smoothed, carved, repurposed. That would still make it extraordinary proof that humans were shaping their environment long before written history. Then again, some theories go even further. There are those who claim the Yonaguni Monument is evidence of a forgotten global civilization, a seafaring people who built in stone and vanished without a trace. They connect Yonaguni to Easter Island, the pyramids and even the ruins of Dwarka in India. A kind of prehistoric architectural network now hidden beneath the sea. Others whisper about aliens or ancient advanced technology or lost continents that sank beneath the waves after some great cataclysm. These ideas are less science, more story, but they persist because the ocean keeps secrets well. Whether natural or not, the Yonaguni Monument continues to attract diverse dreamers and researchers. The visibility in the water is often crystal clear, offering haunting views of stone terraces disappearing into the deep. Swimming through it feels like flying through a drowned cathedral, and in the quiet, when the current is still, you might find yourself wondering not if it's real, but what else is down there, waiting to be found. In the fall of 1966, a man in West Virginia claimed to be approached by a stranger. The man was tall, pale, and oddly smooth. His smile didn't move. His clothes were spotless. He introduced himself telepathically without speaking a word aloud. His name, he said, was Indrid Cold. And over the next few months, this strange figure would become entangled in one of America's most bizarre and frightening flaps of paranormal activity. The encounter began with a man named Woodrow Derenberger, a sewing machine salesman driving home one night near Parkersburg. As he drove along the empty road, a glowing object passed overhead and landed just ahead of him. A figure emerged from the object and approached his truck, not with menace, but with eerie calm. The figure smiled, spoke without speaking, and asked strange, simple questions. What do you call that shining city over the hills? Why are you frightened? Derenberger described the man as tanned with slicked back hair, wearing a metallic blue outfit, and grinning constantly, though unnaturally. The being introduced himself as Indrid Cold, from a place not far from here, but not from Earth. He said he meant no harm. After a brief, surreal exchange, he returned to his craft and departed into the night sky. Derenberger reported the encounter to local authorities and was soon interviewed on live television. He didn't waver. He spoke plainly with a kind of reluctant bewilderment. And then things escalated. Over the following days and weeks, Derenberger claimed that Indrid Cold returned many times, sometimes alone, sometimes with companions. They communicated mentally, sometimes for hours, discussing their home planet, Lanulos, and its peaceful, advanced society. Derenberger's family, friends, and even neighbors began reporting odd occurrences. Lights in the sky, strange men watching from the tree line, phone calls with static and strange voices. This alone would be eerie enough. But it didn't happen in isolation. Around the same time, just hours away, in Point Pleasant, sightings of a terrifying creature began, described as tall, winged with glowing red eyes. It would come to be known as the Mothman. Witnesses claimed it followed cars, hovered over houses, and stared silently from rooftops. Some said it communicated without words. Some said it smiled. More and more people began reporting encounters with men in black figures in dark suits who visited them after sightings, asking questions, sometimes issuing warnings. These men too were pale, emotionless, smooth-skinned, mechanical in movement and tone. Indrid Cold's name began to crop up in whispered conversations. Was he one of them? A benevolent outlier, or something else entirely? By late 1967, fear was boiling in Point Pleasant. Then just before Christmas, the Silver Bridge collapsed, killing 46 people. The sighting stopped. Derenberger, meanwhile, continued to report occasional visits from Cold. His life was never the same. He lost his job, became a recluse, and spent years trying to reconcile the quiet normalcy of his past with the surreal events that followed. He never retracted his story. Not once. Skeptics, of course, had theories that Derenberger hallucinated the encounter, that he was seeking attention, that the Mothman reports created a cultural ripple that swept others into delusion. But if it were that simple, why did so many different people report so many strange things before they had heard of each other? Cold remains one of the most unnerving figures in modern folklore. Not because he threatened anyone, but because he didn't. Because he smiled too long, spoke without sound, appeared without warning, and left behind no proof, just unease. Some say he was a kind of alien scout, gauging humanity's readiness. Others think he was never physical at all, but a psychic echo, some entity we summoned by accident. A few believe he still appears to those who are paying attention, always smiling, always just out of reach. His name lingers in quiet corners of the internet, in strange radio shows, in grainy photocopied reports passed around by believers. And once you hear it, Cold, it tends to stick. So if you ever find yourself driving a lonely road at night, and a man appears by the roadside in a spotless suit, smiling too perfectly, asking strange questions without moving his lips, maybe just keep driving. He says he means no harm, but he's not from here. In cities across the globe, from Bristol to Taos to Auckland, ordinary people report hearing something no one else can quite explain: a low, constant mechanical hum. It drones on in the background, sometimes at night, sometimes all day. For some, it's a minor annoyance. For others, it's life-altering. They can't sleep. They can't concentrate. Some even move homes, quit jobs, or suffer breakdowns. And yet, there's nothing there. No machine, no factory, no sound that anyone can measure. It's called the hum, and it might be the world's strangest modern acoustic mystery. The phenomenon first gained public attention in the 1970s, but the earliest known reports stretch back even farther. One of the most famous cases occurred in Bristol, England, where hundreds of residents complained of a persistent humming sound that began around 1970. It was low frequency, like a diesel engine idling somewhere nearby. And it never stopped. Yet when audio engineers and investigators came to measure it, they found nothing. No matching frequencies, no hidden generators, no nearby factories. The reports kept coming. In the United States, the city of Taos, New Mexico, became another hotspot. A group of residents, roughly 2% of the population, reported hearing a persistent low-frequency buzz. The government got involved. Investigators from Los Alamos National Laboratory, Sandia Labs, and the University of New Mexico arrived with high-end equipment. Still, no source, no hum, nothing measurable. And yet the people hearing it were not imagining it, at least not entirely. They described physical symptoms: headaches, nausea, anxiety, insomnia. Some claimed the sound vibrated through their bones. Others said it felt like pressure in the chest or a tension behind the eyes. What they all agreed on was the sensation of being haunted by a sound that wasn't supposed to exist. So what causes the hum? There are several theories, and none of them are satisfying. One explanation suggests that it's a form of tinnitus, a condition that causes internal ringing or humming in the ears. But that doesn't explain why groups of people all begin hearing it at the same time in the same location. Tinnitus is personal. The hum feels collective. Others propose a phenomenon known as autoacoustic emissions, where the ear itself generates sound. Still others suggest electromagnetic interference, perhaps from high-voltage power lines, cell towers, or submarine communication systems. These could, in theory, cause certain individuals to perceive vibrations as low-frequency hums. But again, there's no consistent link. Some affected areas have no such infrastructure nearby. Then there's the very low-frequency VLF theory, which involves radio waves used by the military to communicate with submarines. These signals are powerful and travel long distances. It's possible that some people are uniquely sensitive to them, like human radio receivers, picking up transmissions they were never meant to hear. More fringe theories suggest the hum is a side effect of secret government experiments, or even a form of psychological conditioning, low-level signals sent to nudge populations into compliance. These theories don't offer much in the way of proof, but they thrive because the alternatives are no more satisfying. In some regions, authorities try to take action. In Kokomo, Indiana, where the hum became a local controversy, investigators identified two industrial sources, an air compressor and a cooling fan. They shut both down. Some residents reported relief. Others heard no difference at all, which raises the most uncomfortable possibility of all that. The hum isn't a sound in the air. It's a sound in the brain that once someone hears about it, once they become aware of the possibility, the brain starts filling in the silence. That the hum is a kind of auditory haunting created by expectation and attention. But if that's the case, it's happening across continents, across languages, across decades, and no one can explain why only some people hear it. There's something especially unsettling about a noise that no one else can hear. Unlike ghosts or lights in the sky, this isn't a thing you see. You can't point to it. You can't record it. You can't convince others it's real, because it isn't real to them. It's private, intimate, unverifiable. And maybe that's what makes it so maddening. To this day, there's no definitive cause, no universal pattern, just people in isolated towns and quiet cities lying awake at night, hearing the same thing, a dull, endless hum that never stops, and wondering if no one else hears it. It's still really there. A ship is found drifting in the Atlantic Ocean. Sails intact cargo, undisturbed, no signs of struggle. The food is still in the pantry. A child's toy lies on the floor. The crew's belongings are in place, but every single person on board is missing, vanished without a trace. There's no blood, no damage, and no explanation. The name of the ship is burned into maritime legend, Mary Celeste. She set sail on November 7th, 1872, from New York, bound for Genoa, Italy. The cargo, 1701 barrels of industrial alcohol. Aboard were 10 people, including the captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife, their 2-year-old daughter, and a crew of 7. It was a typical commercial voyage across the Atlantic. Nothing about it should have made history. But less than a month later, on December 5th, the British brig Dei Gratia spotted a ship aimlessly adrift about 400 miles off the Azores. That ship was the Mary Celeste. As the crew of the Dei Gratia approached, they could see something was wrong. The sails were set oddly. The ship seemed oddly trimmed in the water sluggish. When they boarded it, what they found was eerie. The Mary Celeste was in seaworthy condition. The hull was undamaged. There were no signs of violence, no fire, no flooding. The logbook's last entry was from 10 days earlier. The ship had been adrift all that time. The lifeboat was missing, but everything else remained the cargo untouched, 6 months' worth of food and water. The crew's clothes, even Captain Briggs's neatly kept log and navigation instruments. It was as if the people had stepped off the ship mid-meal and never came back. Naturally, theories began to swirl. Some suggested piracy, but pirates don't leave behind valuable goods or fresh food in the galley. Others pointed to mutiny, but again, there was no sign of struggle, no damage to the ship, no stolen items. Captain Briggs was known as competent and respected. His crew had no record of conflict or insubordination. A popular idea was alcohol fumes. The Mary Celeste's cargo of industrial alcohol could have leaked, releasing explosive vapors. Perhaps the crew panicked, believing the ship might blow, and abandoned ship temporarily, only to be lost at sea. This theory is plausible, but it has a hole. 9 of the barrels were found empty, but they were made of a more porous wood and may have leaked naturally. And if the crew had fled to escape fumes, why didn't they return once they saw the ship hadn't exploded? Others pointed to natural phenomena, a waterspout, a sudden rogue wave or seaquake, something that frightened the crew into leaving. But again, the ship was stable. The storm sails were set. The log showed no mention of weather trouble. Then there's the more colorful speculation. Some believe the crew was attacked by a giant squid pulled off the ship one by one. Others say ghosts or sea monsters. A few suggest UFOs. There's even a theory involving time slips. The idea that the Mary Celeste passed through some rift in space-time, where her crew was spirited away, leaving only the vessel behind. The ship herself was brought back to port, and a formal investigation was launched. The court found no evidence of foul play, but couldn't explain what happened. Despite various theories, no crew member was ever seen again. Their bodies were never recovered. Their fates never discovered. The story grew over time. Arthur Conan Doyle. Yes, the creator of Sherlock Holmes wrote a fictionalized version that added even more intrigue. His tale invented conspiracies, foreign assassins, and secret cargo. That version became so popular, many readers assumed it was fact. The real Mary Celeste story needed no such embellishment. She would continue to sail for over a decade, changing hands multiple times. But her reputation was stained. No one wanted to captain her. Superstitions clung to her like barnacles. Her final voyage was in 1885, when she was intentionally wrecked off the coast of Haiti as part of an insurance fraud scheme. Her bones now lie beneath the Caribbean waves, but her mystery floats on. There's something profoundly unsettling about a ship in perfect condition, adrift and empty. The idea that people can simply vanish from the middle of their lives, dinner uncooked beds, unmade books, half read. No screams, no clues, just absence. The Mary Celeste has become shorthand for the inexplicable. She's more than a ghost ship. She's a question still bobbing out there in the dark. Because if it happened once, it could happen again. In the early 2000s, a user appeared on internet message boards claiming to be from the year 2036. His name was John Teeter, and at first, no one paid him much attention. time travel stories had come and gone. But Taito was different. He didn't just make wild claims, he offered technical details, diagrams, timelines, and warnings. And what began as a quirky online post soon evolved into one of the most compelling digital mysteries of the 21st century. He first surfaced in 2000 on forums related to time travel, writing in a calm, measured tone. He claimed to be a soldier from a future version of the United States sent back to retrieve an IBM 4100 computer, yes, a real model from the 1970s. According to him, this ancient machine was needed in the future to debug legacy systems after a devastating series of technological collapses. It sounded absurd until people realized the IBM 5100 actually did have secret functions, hidden diagnostic capabilities, not widely known even by the public at the time. This obscure technical detail gave Taito sudden credibility. Either he was a computer engineer with deep knowledge of 1970s hardware, or he was exactly what he claimed to be. He described the America of 2036 as a fractured post-Civil War country. He spoke of widespread unrest, a divided nation, and rural communities cut off from cities. He predicted a third world war in the mid-2000s, something that thankfully didn't come to pass. But many of his broader themes, political division, economic uncertainty, global tension, seemed to hit uncomfortably close to home in the years that followed. Tito posted regularly for several months, answering questions with a mix of technical jargon, dry humor, and cryptic vagueness. He shared diagrams of his time machine, which he said was installed in a 1967 Chevrolet. He explained time travel in terms of micro-singularities, Tipler Sine waves, and event horizons, sprinkling in just enough plausible physics to make people lean in. But the most fascinating part was his insistence that he couldn't change the future. According to Taito, the timeline he came from was just one of many. His arrival in our timeline had already created divergence. So if his predictions didn't happen, that didn't mean he was lying. It just meant this wasn't his 2000. It was ours. That clever detail made his story unprovable and unfalsifiable. No matter what happened, it fit. And then in March 2001, he disappeared. No goodbye, no dramatic sign-off, just silence. The posts stopped. The account went dark. Taito never appeared again under the same name. But his legend exploded. Websites sprang up cataloging his every message. Journalists tried to trace his IP address. Programmers examined the metadata in his images. One investigative team concluded the entire saga was the work of a Florida entertainment lawyer and his brother, a kind of long-form performance art. But they denied it. And even if it was a hoax, it was remarkably thorough. Because here's the thing, John Titor didn't act like a troll. He didn't seek fame, never monetized his story, and often refused to answer questions he deemed dangerous. He never contradicted himself. He sounded, for lack of a better word, bored like a real traveler, passing time in a version of the past that didn't quite matter to him. To this day, people still revisit his posts. Some claim new world events prove him right after all. Others think he was warning us, just not in the way we expected, and still others believe John Titor was real. That he came here, retrieved what he needed, said what he could, and left back to 2036, or maybe to a different version of it. Because whether he was a genius hoaxer, a paranoid engineer, or a visitor from a fractured timeline, one thing's certain: he left a mark. He made us ask questions about fate, time, and how much control we really have over either. And somewhere in a timeline, not too different from ours, maybe he's looking back at us, watching this story become just another piece of the past he tried gently to warn us about. So now, with the last candle of curiosity flickering low, let's let these mysteries rest. From silent battlefields and vanishing armies, to unread ciphers, humming skies, and ships adrift without a soul. What lingers isn't always the fear, it's the stillness, the unfinished sentence, the chair left, pulled out the tea, left half sipped, the knowledge that something happened but no one knows what. And maybe that's why these stories stick to us. They remind us that even in a world ruled by data cameras and high-speed everything, there are still dark corners, still folds in the map, still questions with no answers, and maybe no answer coming. They hum quietly in the background, like the sound of a distant engine that no one else hears, or the whisper of wind through rigging on a ship that should be empty. But now it's late. The world has quieted. The flickering shadows of Indrid cold, and the hum and the Roman soldiers still marching in fog, let them settle. Let the cipher remain unread, the mummy's mouth unclosed. We're allowed sometimes to not know. Let the strange, the unexplained, the unfinished stories drift, because in the quiet of your room, the mysteries can sleep too. And tomorrow, they'll still be there waiting. And who knows? Maybe one day you'll be the one to solve them. But not tonight. Tonight, let the unsolved be gentle. Let them fade with the last thoughts before sleep. Good night.